The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on YouTube and on iTunes. And thanks to our friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we are distributed to cable systems serving an additional 12 million households. I'm your host, Gary Baumgarten. Well, we've been talking a lot about politics, and yesterday we talked about terrorism, and the guest who wrote a novel on terrorism was a member of the White House under the Reagan administration. And I commented that, unfortunately, Ronald Reagan, his last years were filled with dementia because he suffered from an advanced state of Alzheimer's, and basically he didn't know the President of the United States, who he was, where he was, who was around him. And sadly, this is a problem that strikes more people than we give it credit for, actually. I think that there are people who may not have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, who perhaps we all know them. As we age, we get a little bit forgetful. We start forgetting certain things along the way, like Boaz sometimes forgets his own name, you know. I shouldn't make light of it, but it's true. Anyway, there you go. There you go right there. So as it so happens, a group of researchers in Georgia have determined through a breakthrough study that diet, which we already know can affect us in terms of our cardio care and diabetes and obesity and a whole series of other health issues, can also affect our ability to maintain our sharpness of our mind. The lead researcher has been so gracious to come on the show with us today. Dr. Christopher Ramsden, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Thanks a lot, Gary. It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Tell us what caused you to even go down this path. What caused you to believe that there's even a possibility that the diet that we have could affect whether we suffer Alzheimer's or dementia?
Well, Gary, there's actually some interesting evidence that's emerging from around the world, from Europe as well as in the United States. There's actually some rather large studies that have taken a look at this exact topic, and several of them have shown that there's a pretty large impact on, there's a pretty large role for diet in determining a risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, and also other forms of cognitive decline. In fact, as you stated earlier, we think that Alzheimer's disease can probably be prevented by the diet to a similar extent as heart disease, diabetes, or obesity. And many of the changes are actually quite simple and easily made.
Well, interestingly, some of the same diets that are recommended by, for example, heart surgeons probably are similar to what you are recommending to stave off the effects of Alzheimer's.
To some extent, there's some overlap, but there's actually quite a few things that are not recommended by standard U.S. dietary guidance that appear to have a much larger role, and some of these things are dietary things that regulate inflammation and oxidative stress, which are two important things that play a role in Alzheimer's, as opposed to sort of the standard dietary guidelines, which are more focused on cholesterol.
Well, there's no effect in your mind between cholesterol and Alzheimer's?
There is some suggestion that there's an impact, and that it may be relatively minor in comparison to other things, especially inflammation, which appears to be the main driver of Alzheimer's. So also, what it appears that U.S. dietary practices may actually promote brain damage and eventually predisposed to Alzheimer's dementia.
I recall years ago my hairdresser back in Detroit. I was sitting there. You're not supposed to do this while you're getting your hair cut, but yes, she was a hairdresser, a hairstylist. Come on, you guys. Don't get so upset about that. And I'm drinking a can of soda. And she's saying to me, "Oh, no, 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 don't do that. The aluminum in the soda can promote Alzheimer's." Is that true?
I'm focusing more on things that are, there's some pretty strong evidence linking some of these dietary things to Alzheimer's, and I think that needs to be looked at in more detail. But there's certainly no peer-reviewed literature that's shown any link between aluminum and Alzheimer's disease as of yet. There could potentially be a role for heavy metal accumulation, which is aluminum, more likely mercury, and some forms of brain damage, but that's really not what I'm focusing on here today. I just want to get across the things that have actually been shown to play a larger role already. And unfortunately, a lot of this information hasn't been shared with the people who can benefit from it.
Heavy metal has affected me. I'm hard of hearing, but that was the music, not not the consumption of the heavy metal. So what are you recommending to people, and are you recommending this to all of us, or just people who have families that have a predisposition to Alzheimer's? Is there a genetic link anyway when it comes to this, or is this something that everybody should do, is follow these suggestions that you have come up with?
Well, first, there is a genetic link to Alzheimer's, but it appears that this genetic link only accounts for maybe 10 to 20% of all of the Alzheimer's that's, at least so far, that has been studied. It may turn out that it may account for even more of that, but most of the Alzheimer's is what's known as sporadic Alzheimer's, or occurs in someone without a family history. There's one genetic risk factor called ApoE4 that we're not going to really get into today, but the dietary changes I'm talking about today can be applied to everyone, and pretty much everybody in the population would benefit from them.
Well, let's get right to some of that. Somebody in our virtual auditorium with the nickname of MS Jaden says, give us some suggestions, please. And I agree. Why don't we get right to it, Dr. Christopher Ramsden? What should we include as a regular staple in our diets?
Well, just some really quick background information. The two metabolic pathways that seem to be most involved are inflammation and oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is really just another name for free radical damage. So probably the most high-yield strategy for preventing Alzheimer's is to block inflammation. And the dietary component that appears to be most important in this regard, especially in inflammation in the brain, is an omega-3 fatty acid called DHA for short. And this is a compound that's very highly concentrated in the brain. And, just some quick background on it. Post-mortem analysis of Alzheimer's brain showed that they're deficient in this particular compound, and it actually regulates a lot of important metabolic pathways. So several studies